Camping is a great way to get away from it all and enjoy nature, but sleeping under the stars comes with its own set of dangers. I'm talking about animals of the humankind. These horrifying true stories will make you think twice before hitting the open road. Here are 4 chilling cases of camping gone wrong. Thanks for watching True Crime Recaps. I'm Chris, and we love camping. And how about you? The fresh air, the sights and sounds of nature all around you. But sometimes that fun outdoor experience can turn into something far more sinister. Consider the case of newlyweds Kylen Schulte and Crystal Beck Turner in Moab, Utah. The women were living a nomadic lifestyle, staying in their van, moving from campsite to campsite with their pet rabbit. They were last seen leaving Woody's Tavern in Moab on August 13, 2021. They were experienced enough to know that in the great outdoors, other humans still pose a threat. So when they got spooked by a weird guy camping near them, they told friends about it and moved campsites. Then on August 14th, they stopped responding. 4 days went by without a word. A worried friend tracked them down on August 18th. It was worse than anyone could have imagined. Both women had been shot to death. Their bodies were left near the campsite. Kylen was partially submerged in a nearby creek, but who would murder the friendly, loving couple, and why? In the first few days after the gruesome discovery, speculation gathered speed because, coincidentally, another case was making headlines in the same area: the tragic murder of Gabby Petito. As you probably know, Gabby and her boyfriend, Brian Laundrie, were on a cross-country van trip before he killed her at a park in Wyoming at the end of August in 2021. Here's how that case connected to this one. Shortly before Kylen and Crystal were last seen, Brian and Gabby were seen fighting in front of the Moonflower Co-op in Moab. That's where their 2 stories crossed paths. Kylen worked at that store. She was a favorite cashier there for years. And for a very short time, people wondered if the creepy guy the women had complained about was Brian. But as it turned out, their suspected killer had a connection to Crystal's job, not Kylen's. In May 2022, the sheriff ID'd a primary suspect, Adam Pinkowitz. He was a former employee of the McDonald's in Moab where Crystal worked, and they tracked him to the area where they'd last been seen. Why did he do it? Did Crystal know Adam? Was he the man that had spooked them enough to move campsites? Did Crystal recognize him? If she had, why didn't she drop his name? Unless, of course, he knew her, but she didn't know him. According to the Daily Beast, a citizen sleuth by the name of Bullhorn Betty talked to workers at that McDonald's, and Adam's name came up as someone that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Quote, "They described him as a homeless former worker who had gotten into a fight with another lesbian couple and was bad news. And apparently he skedaddled out of town so fast after the murders that he never even picked up his last paycheck." She passed that information on to investigators, but Adam had already left the area. By the time they caught up to him, he was dead. He killed himself, but not before confiding in a friend, and the details he gave were things only the killer would have known. But investigators are still looking for more information before they officially close the case. You just never know what you'll run into on the trail. That's part of the thrill of hiking and camping, unless you cross paths with a serial killer, of course. And one of the most terrifying killers of all time, Israel Keyes, hunted humans in remote parks, campsites, and once he even grabbed a girl right off of her inner tube while she was going down the river. He eluded cops for years because he chose his victims at random in locations far from his home base. He might still be out there today if he hadn't broken his own rule in 2012. That's when he dragged Samantha Koenig out of the coffee kiosk where she worked as a barista in Anchorage, Alaska, not far from the house where he lived with his family. His interviews with the FBI are some of the most chilling you'll ever hear. He was caught and he wasn't holding back on details. He even bragged about his kill caches buried across the United States. These were murder kits with weapons, zip ties, portable shovels, everything a killer might need to commit the perfect crime. And Israel Keyes isn't the only killer patiently waiting for a victim to sit down by a crackling campfire in the lonely woods. 3 generations of family set out for 2 weeks of hiking, fishing, and camping in British Columbia, Canada in early August 1982. It was Grandma and Grandpa, George and Edith Bentley, their daughter and son-in-law, Jackie and Bob, and their daughters, 13-year-old Janet and 11-year-old Karen. They were hauling an almost new Ford camper with a good-sized aluminum boat strapped on top. It should have been the trip of a lifetime, but they never made it out of those woods. No one knew anything was wrong until Bob's vacation days ran out and he never came back to work. Weeks passed and search parties turned up no sign of them. Then, more than a month after they were last seen, a hiker stumbled across the burnt-out remains of Bob's 1979 Plymouth. The charred bodies of all 4 adults were inside. What was left of the children was in the trunk. But where was their prized camper? The family's camping spot was discovered 12 miles away. Bob's favorite beer was still cooling in a nearby stream. Sharpened sticks for roasting marshmallows were standing by, and shell casings from the bullets used to murder the entire family littered the ground. But it would take another year to locate the missing camper and the demented killer who took it. It turned up in October 1983. It was about 19 miles from the bodies, but only someone who knew the area and its back roads would have been able to drive it there. Someone like 24-year-old David Shearing. He was an outdoorsman who had noticed Janet and Karen and stalked the family like animals. He shot the grown-ups to get them out of the way, then set about his real reason for the murderous rampage. For the next week, he held the girls captive so he could rape and torture them. When he tired of them, he shot and killed them too. He looted everything valuable and set their cars, bodies, and camper on fire to destroy all trace of them. Later, they found the family's things on his parents' ranch nearby the campsite he terrorized. And yes, he's still alive. As of 2021, he's still behind bars, but he comes up for parole regularly. Is it safer to take shelter in a cabin in the woods? If you're brave enough to learn the answer, keep watching. In 1990, the Tiede family gathered to celebrate the Christmas holidays in their cozy cabin. It was nestled into the mountains of Utah so snugly, the long driveway was only accessible by snowmobiles in the winter. And that was exactly the kind of picturesque scene they wanted. 16-year-old Tricia and 20-year-old Lene were sisters. Kay and Rolf were their parents, and their grandmother Beth Potts was with them. 3 days before Christmas, while the family was out of the house playing in the snow, 2 ex-cons broke in. Vaughn Taylor and Edward Deli were parolees from a halfway house, and they were familiar with the area. They saw the family leave and made themselves at home in the cabin while they waited for them to come back. They even picked up a video camera and filmed themselves opening the family's presents. And when the Tiedes returned, the men attacked. Kay and her mother Beth were shot and killed in the living room. Their bodies were dragged out onto the deck. Rolf was shot along with them, but unbeknownst to them, he was only playing dead. The girls were taken hostage, but they set the house on fire before they left. That was a specialty of Ed Deli's. At 21, he had already been convicted of arson. Vaughn Taylor was 25 and had served time for aggravated burglary. On that day, they both graduated to kidnapping and murder. They took the girls down the hill on snowmobiles where they forced them into the family's car. What they didn't know was that Rolf was right behind them on his own snowmobile. The killers had doused him with gasoline along with the rest of the house, but his thick winter gear protected him long enough for him to rush to the shower and put out the flames. As he was chasing the attackers down the hill, he passed his brother who was on his way up to join them. He managed to call for help, and together they saved the day. The killers led police on a high-speed chase for miles, but eventually they were caught and the girls were rescued, and Rolf too escaped with his life. Ed Deli was sentenced to life in prison, and Vaughn Taylor got the death penalty. So, where are you spending your next vacation?